Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing Game 7 of the Sharks Avalanche series, in which the Sharks won and have thus won this series 3-2, winning the series 4-3. So a second Game 7 series in a row for the Sharks, 2 consecutive Game 7 victories for the Sharks, and they will face off against the St. Louis Blues in the third round. And just for a little Sharks, recap here, the last time the Sharks made the Stanley Cup Finals, or the only actual time they made the Stanley Cup Finals, back in 2016, the team they defeated in the Western Conference Finals also happened to be the St. Louis Blues. So hopefully history can repeat itself somewhat. But back to this game, the Sharks didn't start off too well. The Avalanche had control during the first few minutes of the first period, but then the Sharks really turned it on, started getting chance after chance, and it was Joe Pavelski who returned for this game in particular. Who knows if he's even 100% healthy? It is highly doubtful, but you know Pavelski is not going to sit out an all-deciding Game 7, and he scores a huge goal to give the Sharks the 1-0 lead, eventually also makes a great pass to Hurdle to give the Sharks a 2-goal lead in that first period. As the Sharks continue to get chances, Grubauer's making some saves, and we come down to the last few seconds of the first period when Mikko Rantanen gets his first goal of this series for the Avalanche, his 6th of the playoffs, and the Avalanche are within 1. So strong first period for the Sharks ends up being a lot closer than they probably would have liked it to be. In the second period, the Sharks continuing to press, still playing some great hockey. They were the much better team than the Avalanche through the first 40 minutes of this game. Jonas Donskoi expands that lead with technically the only goal in the third period, as he made it 3-1. There was an Avalanche goal that was called back for offside. I will get to that a bit later on. As you can see, officiating is up on the board. So by the end of 40 minutes, it was 3-1 Sharks. Come to the third period, the Avalanche were not going to go away. We saw how much desperation they came out with in Game 6 when the game was tied after 2 periods, and they did the same here when they're trailing 2. They get an early Tyson Jost goal, his 3rd game in a row with a goal, and they're within 1, just with still 19 minutes left in the third period. But while the Avalanche gets shots, the Sharks certainly bend, but they do not break. The Sharks pull off a strong defensive effort. Martin Jones is at the peak of his game, and especially in the last couple of minutes, players throwing the body out, trying to block these shots. Martin Jones making 2 amazing saves, I believe one on Kerfoot, and then one that was tipped in front. I'm not sure by who, but it was a McKinnon shot from the point. So marvelous saves. Burns and Vlasic defending so well, and the Sharks hold the Avalanche off for the rest of that 19 minutes of the third period to win it 3-2, and the handshakes come after that. As I said, Sharks move on to the next round. First thing to talk about would be Martin Jones. As I said, a spectacular last couple of minutes for him as he held down the fort. 2 spectacular saves on both Kerfoot and I think it was maybe Landeskog or Wilson or Kerfoot or somebody else in front. But Jones was also playing rather well through the rest of the game, even if there wasn't too much to do. As I said, the Avalanche really didn't get much of anything going within the first couple of periods. They got a few decent chances in the first period, a couple decent chances in the second period, but there really wasn't much. Most of what he had to do was coming in the third period, and he did exactly what he needed to do. Now, this is, I think, 10 games in a row where Jones has been at a rather high level. I mean, Game 6 wasn't fantastic, but it was still solid for Martin Jones, and so it can be said that he is definitely back, and he's definitely going to need to be very good as the Sharks move into the next series if they want to continue winning games. Next is Joe Pavelski. As I said, Pavelski, not a player at all to sit out a Game 7 when his team is on the brink of being eliminated or on the brink of moving on to the next round, as that is what a Game 7 is. And Pavelski showed what he was worth early on in this game. He fell off a bit near the end, which is not too surprising, but early on he really made plays happen, got that goal, beautiful pass to Hurdle. He slotted perfectly on the Kane-Hurdle line. That line finally looked rejuvenated early on in this game, as I expected. Pavelski took the place of Donskoi instead of moving Nyquist down and going back to the first line, because the Meyer, Couture, Nyquist line has probably been the only consistent line for the Sharks throughout this entire series, and Pavelski gets it done in Game 7, a huge game for him. I don't know if he was the MVP of this game necessarily with how Jones performed and everything like that, but he was definitely a huge part, and I believe he got first star. Next, I'll talk about the Burns-Vlasic pairing, as they were also very good down the stretch. Vlasic had a couple of moments on the Jost goal. Actually, both of these players were victimized with bad plays. Burns with the giveaway that allowed the Avalanche to keep it in the zone, and then Vlasic failing to clear it from the front of the net that allowed Jost to put this one in. But besides that, if you can look past that, they had spectacular games defensively. Brent Burns, just in general, has been so good defensively in this series. Vlasic as well has been unbelievable. These two players were tasked with shutting down Landeskog, McKinnon, and Rantanen, and that is a very hard thing to do. It's hard to keep them off the scoreboard completely. McKinnon actually got hurt in this game, missed about 14 minutes in the first period before coming back. I don't know if he was at 100% after that, but he still played 21 minutes in this game. So imagine if he was there for those 14 minutes, he could have been hitting 25 or 26 minutes just in regulation. And so these guys play a ton. They play very, very well, all extremely good players. And so having Burns and Vlasic here, they did a strong job at limiting the chances that those players could get. A lot of their things had to come from the perimeter. Something the Avalanche was doing so much in this series was shooting from the point. And in this game in particular, Burns and Vlasic just a fantastic job of playing that shutdown role, even if they did make that slight mistake on the Jost goal. Finally, I'll talk about officiating, which maybe I'll talk about a decent amount. A lot of people, not Sharks fans obviously, are quite upset with the officiating in this game and are saying that the Sharks have now been handed 2 straight Game 7s to them on a silver platter by the referees. The Game 5, the 5-minute major in Game 7 against the Golden Knights, now here with the offside goal called off, as well as McKinnon was tripped up on what was sort of a breakaway, I guess. I don't know if it would have been a penalty shot if it was called, and it was not called. And so I can see the sentiment, but let me first start with the offside call. Now, technically, from the views I saw, this was offside. Now, of course, some people are saying that, I haven't seen a view that shows that this is actually offside, but I think that it will become clear over the next couple of days that this was the correct call. Now, I think what really needs to be talked about, and what most people actually are talking about in a more rational state of mind, is should this really be a rule in the NHL? So this is why I don't think that the refs, or I guess the linesman in this case, handed the Sharks this one, and the Avalanche should have been tied at 3, because technically it was offside, but you're also evaluating whether or not a player who's going to the bench was over the line by like half an inch maybe, and so it definitely goes against the spirit of the rule, and it seems like that's the case a lot for these offside calls. Rarely are you seeing offside calls where a team rushes in the zone, they go offside, but it's not called, and within a couple of seconds the puck's in the net by the player who was offside. A lot of these offside calls are coming when a team enters the zone, spends 20 seconds in the zone, and then they score a goal, and it's called back from 20 seconds earlier when someone was just half an inch offside, which goes again against the spirit of the game. You probably just want to see game flow, and this was a similar case. Even if this goal came rather early upon the entry, Landeskog has zero impact on what the play here is. And of course, in a similar vein as you could blame the Vegas Golden Knights penalty kill for collapsing in that Game 7, you could probably blame Landeskog or someone on the bench for why does he take so long to get back to the bench? He's standing there for a good 2 or 3 seconds fiddling with the opening of the little gate on the bench trying to get back. Why doesn't a teammate help him? Why doesn't he jump over the boards? I'll never know. But again, by the letter of the law, this is offside. Whether or not that needs to be discussed in the offseason is up for debate. It's going to be a difficult one to do, however, because of the fact that how do you draw a line somewhere, right? You enter the zone, do you say you need to be in the zone for 10 seconds before you can no longer review? But then there's going to be someone who scores a goal within 9 seconds and says, wait a minute. So do you maybe lower that? Do you raise it to 20 seconds? At that point, you're going to get someone with 19 seconds in the zone who just scored a goal, and they say, why can we review that? Do you say, in this case, what would help would be someone who's completely out of the play and unaffected? You can't review for that, but then how do you judge how much someone is out of the play? If they never touch the puck, are they out of the play, or them just being an option to pass to counts as them being in the... So it's a really tough one to do, and I feel like the only way you can actually solve this without trying to get some sort of convoluted situation where it just makes it completely worse is just removing the offside review completely. I don't know if people want to do that, because of course there is like, the rare situation where an actual egregious offside of like a good couple inches is missed, as of course the reason this rule is in place in the first place is because of that Matt Duchene goal a few years back where he was 100% offside but somehow wasn't called. But I feel as though people are willing to accept that if it means getting rid of the review, and I would probably be up for that as well, because it is tough to see, and I probably would have been very upset if this happened against the Sharks, even if it was technically the correct call. On the McKinnon one, this is obviously a penalty. I'm not going to argue that this wasn't a tripping call, but just because it happens in a Game 7, it's sort of like a what goes around comes around. We saw Erik Karlsson twice this series on Sharks power plays get tripped up, could have been 5-on-3s, and those were in Games 2 and in Game 4. 2 losses for the San Jose Sharks. Who knows what they could have done with a 5-on-3. And so just because this one trip was in Game 7, it doesn't really nullify the fact that in Games 2 and Games 4, there were also missed tripping calls on the Sharks, where if they win those games, there isn't even a Game 7 in the series. So I'm not going to look back on just one single missed call, even if it was one that could have led to a goal, because there are so many missed calls throughout the series, and at that point, it's not really fair to say that they were handed the series. Is it a missed call? Were the refs in favor of the Sharks in this game? Potentially, yes. But again, it goes back to the fact that for the rest of the series, the Sharks had missed calls going for them as well, those 2 Karlsson trips in particular. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Saturday. They will play Game 1 against the St. Louis Blues. They will be at home, as the Blues, I think, had a couple less points than the Sharks, so a third straight series in which the Sharks are the home team. If they make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, they would be the home team against the Hurricanes, but they would not be the home team against the Boston Bruins, and the Bruins, of course, would be a tough challenge for them, but it's one game at a time. And as I said, the last time the Sharks faced off against the St. Louis Blues in the third round was 2016. The Sharks won that series, but they did lose Game 1, so no reason to panic if that does occur, but we'll see what happens. Class dismissed.